Darrel Brooks, the convicted 6-time murderer, sex offender who ran over 6 innocent victims ranging from 8 to 80, was recently transferred from one prison to another for his safety as he was beaten, poisoned, and many other things. Let's get into it. Darrel Brooks, the chomo, the piece of shit, the coward, carried out one of the most shocking crimes of his life when he drove his red Ford SUV into a crowd during an annual Christmas parade. The incident left 6 people dead and over 60 injured, many of whom were children and elderly individuals. Brooks drove through the barricades and continued his rampage, fleeing the scene only to be arrested a short time later. Basically got into a fight with his girlfriend, who he tried to strangle again. And since he couldn't win that one, what's the next best thing? I'll go run over some kids and elderly. And you wonder why he's getting tortured in prison the way he is. In addition to his sex offense that we'll get into, in 2011, he was arrested for strangulation and aggravated assault. And of course, he has all the markings for what all these cowards have: strangulation, domestic batteries, sex charges. In 2011, he was arrested for strangulation and aggravated assault. He would eventually get sentenced to prison as the assault led to a serious physical harm, and Brooks was sentenced to prison. As we know, these cowards will always go after the weak, the unsuspecting, the vulnerable. He had multiple arrests for domestic violence. So just like all these cowards, they go stalking, as if strangling and doing all that shit wasn't enough. They have to do this because they're rejected, they're insecure, they hate themselves. Brooks was always violating protection orders and engaging in criminal trespassing, aka stalking. He regularly faced legal consequences for breaching restrictions meant to protect the victims of his prior assault. So all he's done now is strangle women, sex charges against 15-year-olds, run over elderly and children. They're all crimes where he doesn't have to ever face adversity. He can overpower the woman. He can overpower the 15-year-old. He can stalk because he has nothing else in his life going on. He can get in that car and run people over because they're not fighting back. Think about that. He was out on bond for strangulation of a girlfriend. He was wanted in Nevada for a sex charge not registering. And the charge was statutory sexual seduction. He'd end up having a child with a 15-year-old girl. They don't give a fuck until they have to give a fuck. This man has strangled, stalked, had statutory sex charges against a 15-year-old that he had a child with that he didn't register for, and they would just let him out. It took him to kill 6 innocent people in broad daylight in his SUV, hurt 60 others for them to say, all right, we're gonna keep him this time. All of his charges involve going after the weak and unsuspecting. As in 2006, he was convicted for sexual assault of a minor. It took him to kill those 6 innocent people for them finally to get him a conviction where he would never see the light of day. He was out on bond for strangling a woman, the history of domestic violence and sex charges. First time he would ever have a conflict with a man in his life, it would be behind a vehicle and an 81-year-old man he would kill. He hurt 60 others in the process. Well, let's get to why we're all here. Because as we know, these dudes all have the same patterns. They get away with it. They just pillage, rape, beat, strangle, stalk women, children, elderly, and they keep getting away with it until they commit the ultimate, where they just can't get away with it because it's too heinous and too many people seen it. Then they go to prison, and all of a sudden they're the victim. The strangler, the rapist, the kid killer, the elderly killer gets to prison, and he's writing his mom saying, they're hurting me, they're poisoning me, they're beating me, help me, help me. Why didn't you call your mom before you committed these acts? Right, we know why. Very recently, Darrel Brooks Jr. was just whisked away from his current prison in Wisconsin, transported out of state. He has undergone multiple prison transfers since his sentencing, including he was held at the Dodge Correctional Institution. And just recently, in 2025, he was transferred to an undisclosed out-of-state facility. Specific reasons for the transfers have still not been disclosed, but such moves address security concerns for inmates. The Department of Corrections can confirm that Darrel Brooks Jr. was moved to an out-of-state facility January 13th. Obviously not able to share any further information regarding Mr. Brooks because of security concerns. Left unsaid is who initiated the transfer and what impact it will have on Brooks' appeal in Wisconsin court. As he was granted another extension of a deadline to follow an appeal, Brooks, formerly of Milwaukee, was transferred to another prison, though exactly which facility has not been publicly disclosed. Wisconsin correction officials simply just acknowledged the move. So let's get into his custody situations. In a letter to his mother, he alleged feeling unsafe, accusing fellow inmates of spitting in his food and prison guards of threatening him with violence. "I've been stripped of everything that makes me feel human." Later in the letter, he would say that he is no longer eating, and he's saying through the poisoning of his food, his body's deteriorating, his energy levels are dropping, and his mind is slipping into a state of hopelessness. Over time, the harassment escalated. Brooks claimed that his food started having a chemical-like taste. After consuming one particular meal, he experienced severe stomach cramping, dizziness, and vomiting. He suspected that his food had been laced with a toxic substance. Prison staff treated him for food poisoning, but no official confirmation was given regarding the cause. Following the series of alleged poisoning and physical abuse, Brooks began refusing to eat, convinced that every meal he was given was laced with chemicals or bodily fluid. He became visibly paranoid, inspecting his food obsessively before pushing it away untouched. His rapid weight loss did not go unnoticed by prison staff, who accused him of staging a hunger strike. All this while other inmates were allegedly taunting Brooks during mealtime, openly spitting in his direction. Some reports suggest that the kitchen staff may have deliberately allowed this mistreatment to occur, turning a blind eye as inmates tampered with this chomo's meals before they reached him. As these incidents recurred, reportedly became fearful of eating anything served to him, at times refusing meals entirely. His complaints to prison authorities were largely dismissed, further fueling his paranoia. They claimed he was exhibiting suicidal tendencies and posed a risk to himself. The stark white walls of the psych unit only intensified his isolation. Stripped of his regular prison clothes and given a thin smock, Brooks was monitored around the clock. That's what they call a turtle suit. Despite his complaints and his repeated claims that he was not suicidal, remained in the psychiatric unit for several days before being quietly transferred to another facility, whether for his own safety or was a way for prison officials to remove a problematic inmate. Brooks' transfer marked yet another chapter in what he described as a campaign of deliberate abuse against him. He's the victim, right? He didn't do anything to get here or make people feel so disgusted with his chomo, elderly, child-killing behavior. He's the victim. The alleged ambush of Darrel Brooks. Apparently, he was brutally attacked by fellow inmates in a violent ambush while in prison. Assault occurred in the common area where Brooks was reportedly walking back to his cell when multiple inmates suddenly rushed him. The attack lasted for nearly a minute before correctional officers intervened, pulling the assailants off of Brooks and dragging him away from the scene. Bloodied and bruised, Brooks was escorted to the prison's medical unit for treatment. Reported suffering a swollen eye, cuts on his face, and bruised ribs. The motive behind the attack remains clear. Brooks' high-profile case and the nature of his crimes have made him a target behind bars. Authorities have since increased security measures around him, and shortly after the incident, he was placed in protective custody before ultimately being transferred to another facility. Regardless, if you like it or not, this is what happens to chomos, child killers, women stranglers, elderly killers, stalkers in prison. They will get to you however they got to get to you. Time doesn't exist, only opportunity. They will just destroy you mentally. Spit in your food, jizz in your food, poison your food, to the point you stop eating. And then from there, they put you in a psych cell. Make your life even worse, as you're now in a freezing cell with a paper-thin turtle suit. You can see him wearing this here. And from there, they send you to another prison. You get there, you put into another unit, you get attacked. They put you in medical, they put you in protected custody, they transfer you to another prison. Remember, he's not a victim. These 6 are victims. 15-year-old girl is a victim. The woman he strangled is a victim. Stay out, stay free, us.